There, man. Good. Game and win. Good evening. I'm going to call to order the work session for Monday, September 8, 2025. The first item on the agenda is public comment on agenda items. If there's anybody here who wishes to speak to something that's on the agenda tonight, now is your time. Please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
My name is Karen Francois. Excuse me, I live at 4005 Burlingame. I agree that having an alcohol service at the Guardian Mercado is a good idea, and it will expand the appeal as an event venue. However, I don't think the alcohol service should be the city operated in regards to the requirement that guests must show an ID to get a wristband. To be able to purchase a drink, consider a wedding reception. The bride and the groom and the rest of the wedding party will have to show ID and wear a wristband. And won't that look nice in the photos? The grandparents of the happy couple will have to pull out ID that shows they are legally old enough to drink. Not that the gray hair and wrinkles and walkers won't give it away. I think that you will lose business over this. I have talked to a couple people who said that they would not use a venue with this setup. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to something on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, we will move on to the Pinery Park Apartment Pilot Ordinance. John.
So if council recalls, we did have first reading of this 2 weeks ago. I might have my dates off a little bit, but Nicole will go through the details, but we have the existing Pinery Park apartments that were constructed in 1979, and they're looking for a payment in lieu of taxes as well as a municipal services agreement with the city to perform $5.5 million in renovations to the existing facility. And the vast majority of the people that live at Pinery Park are elderly and or disabled, most of whom, I think 90% of whom, have incomes less than $25,000 per year. And as if this were to be approved, they would do about a $5.5 million renovation to both the interior and exterior of that Pinery Park Apartments, and also replace, I think it's a 20-unit townhome with a 37-unit townhome as well. And Nicole will go through the summary of that, as well as the revenues that would be generated through traditional taxes versus the revenues that would be generated to the city for the pilot and the municipal services agreement. So.
Thank you, John. That was a great introduction. I could probably sit down for most of it, but
Yeah.
a few things first in front of you. This is the Pinery Park Apartments located at 2300 Newstead, so just directly north of us, up the road here. Just a few photos of that development. You'll note that it's an exceptionally well-maintained development, but it was built in 1979, and so like many facilities of that age, it has challenges. It needs repairs. The developer would like to invest about $5.5 million in updates to the units, including updating the bathrooms, HVAC, kitchen upgrades, repairs, including new windows and doors to make it more energy efficient as well. Renovations would also include brick repairs, roofing repairs, lighting upgrades, carpeting and paint throughout the entire facility, and exterior upgrades, including a parking lot and sidewalk repairs. The project does also include a new addition of a 37-unit multifamily building, which would be replacing a series of 20-unit buildings as well. So as John said, this building really does provide a key community resource for the elderly and disabled residents in Wyoming. 24% of the units in the building are currently occupied by residents that are both elderly and disabled. About 45% of the residents are elderly only, or defined as elderly only, and a third, or 30%, are disabled only. So it serves a significant portion of the population falling within those categories. 64% of the building's residents are over the age of 62, with a median resident age of 66. A notable statistic is that the property serves some of the lowest income individuals in the city of Wyoming. As John had noted, 90% of the residents at Pinery Park have incomes below $25,000 a year, and 65% of those earn incomes of less than 15%. So a significant portion, in fact, more than half of the development is serving those making under $15,000 a year. In order to complete the renovation and expansion of the units, the developer is seeking a low-income housing tax credit, LIHTC funding, through the Michigan Housing State Development Authority. And as part of that, as you're aware, they have to partner that with a pilot through the city. Here at the City of Wyoming, we partner with pilots and MSAs. Pilot is payment in lieu of taxes, and MSA is municipal services agreement. In this project proposal, we're looking at a 1% pilot and a 3% MSA. So the question that's always of interest is, what does that mean for city finances? And so when you look at this particular property, we do have a bit of a unicorn here. Because so much of the investment is renovation into an existing structure, this is one of those rare occasions where on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see the property tax payment for 24 and the estimate for 25 at over $208,000. You'll also see, if you scan all the way to the right, what the total city revenue is on that. And if the pilot and MSA were to go in, you'll see the 26 and the 27 estimates. You'll note that this total city revenue actually continues to increase, but the total property owner payment decreases. So visually, if we look at that, what that means is in 24 and 25, you can see that the owner paid a significant portion in property taxes. That green bar on the bottom is the city portion. So you can see that with the 1% pilot and the 3% MSA, the city will continue to cover costs. In fact, that continues in an upward trend. But the reduction comes mostly out of other county and other taxes, because that's where the difference is between a property tax capture and the county's portion of pilots. Why is this happening? Again, it's a unicorn because it's a renovation of a project, so the property tax value is starting at a different point. And also, this has a larger MSA on it. So if you'll look back at this, remember, pilot payments, the city only gets a portion of that pilot payment. The other portion goes to the county, but MSA comes entirely to the city. So you can see in these estimates, the MSA payment, that 3% MSA payment, is really what's continuing to keep that trajectory of the positive income moving forward. So this is a bit of a unicorn project. I don't think I've ever brought another project in front of council before where I've said a pilot and an MSA will actually continue the same trend that the city is seeing naturally with property tax capture. But in this case, it's for a property with owners who are incredibly responsible and want to be making significant investments. But because of the type of financial structure that they're under, they cannot generate additional revenue to do that. So this will help them do that along with their LIHTC refinancing. I'm available for questions.
Mayor?
So the MSA is paid by the owner.
Mm-hmm.
Collected up from rent from
The
residents.
percentage of shelter rents, yes.
Correct. Will they be able to make this happen and keep rents the same as they have been or close to it by switching to the pilot?
Correct. So they're actually required to keep rents at a certain level because of the HUD contracts that they have, as well as the federal contracts that they have. So this will allow them to maintain those payments that they are entitled to make to the city, as well as keeping rent at that capped level.
Thank you.
Other questions? Sheldon?
Nicole, thanks for this. I'm sorry. Thank you. How can we be assured that the elderly, disabled, and low income continue to be given access to these apartments?
So the units are restricted. So they have to qualify through their income or through age verification or disability verification.
That will go on for the life of the pilot
Correct.
by law?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, the purple
Yes.
is significantly reduced. So the purple is a county, the portion that's going to, or not, no longer go to the county.
County and other taxing jurisdictions. So just not city tax capture.
So what this is this going to affect the property owners of Wyoming?
So what this graphic shows is that right now the green bar shows the amount of money that the city of Wyoming takes in for property taxes. That's the city's portion. So that goes into the general fund to help pay for all the different millages, public safety, et cetera. What this shows is that when we go from 2025, which is the current property tax capture, to the MSA and pilot capture instead in 2026, the city's portion does not decrease. It actually grows, continues to grow. So the amount of money that the city is bringing in will actually grow over time instead of decrease. So no, it has no negative impact in that respect to the general fund.
Okay, so is this going to be more of a burden on the county then instead of?
Well, because of the way property tax structures work, when you put in a pilot and an MSA, the county will only now capture their portion of the pilot payment. So yes, the county will bring in less money than in a traditional property tax method.
That actually applies to each of the other.
Yeah, not just the
That's
county.
correct.
not
Yes,
just the
sorry.
county.
The
Yes.
rapid and. the-
All
County, the
taxing
schools,
jurisdictions.
The library.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, Rob.
Yeah, that was one of my questions, Kat, is that, so what I hear you say though is the dedicated millages that we have for Wyoming, they will not be impacted?
Correct.
So nothing for Wyoming, whether it be public safety, anything, that's all covered. But our local schools could be impacted from this.
Correct.
But
But this is also a development specifically serving the elderly and disabled.
correct.
Was this originally a pilot?
There was a pilot on this property more than a decade ago, and it was from a different property owner who's no longer associated with this project. They sold the project shortly after the pilot closed.
So did the pilot go away when it was sold then?
It was actually revoked by the city of Wyoming at the time that it was sold.
So if this were to sell again, does the pilot continue? Does that go with the sale?
Yeah, so the pilot in this case is tied to the MSHDA loan. So as long as the MSHDA loan stays in place, the pilot would stay in place.
So we've had 50 years of like a pilot program pretty much, and now we're going to add another 50.
No, it wasn't a full 50 years. It was a fraction of the allotment for the time of the original pilot. It was canceled before it had come to fruition. So it's been on the property tax rolls for the last decade.
They violated terms of their agreement, right?
That's correct.
Right, and that could happen again if
And then
if
we
this
can
user violated something. it could be
Correct.
pulled. So they have to do what they're saying they're gonna do.
I think this, oh, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, so what I'm hearing is we're actually very on top of those kinds of things. We probably don't have to worry too much about the what ifs. Would that be fair to say?
I would say that you have an exemplary staff here at the city of Wyoming, led by an excellent city manager and a strong city attorney's office, and we're very good at reviewing contracts and following through.
Great.
I think from a high level point of view, I know it's in our strategic plan to really try to address affordable housing. Here we have an existing affordable housing unit, and I think it's in our community's best interest that that's in the best physical condition possible, not only just for the residents that live there, but for the surrounding neighbors. And in this case, it can be done in a way where the tax revenues that come to the city itself will still increase over time as opposed to going down. So, you know, to use the cliche, it seems more of a win-win situation in this particular case.
I'll say this, if we don't approve it, the current owner probably won't go through with the refurbishment.
Well, they can't, right? Because they can't get funding
That's
for
what I'm
it.
saying. He has to do it out of his own pocket then, which he's unlikely to do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
from what I understand, and Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, if this doesn't happen, I mean, the owner is restricted from raising the rents or can only raise them very little each year. And the amount of rental income coming in is not sufficient to do these type of renovations
That's what
to
I was saying.
the apartment. I think they're taking money from money they want to set aside for capital improvements just to take care of some day-to-day operations and repairs, and that's not really a sustainable model. So you are correct. If the city says no, we won't do this, then these renovations
And the
would
place
not
gets run down quicker. Kind of
And
a slum.
also point out, if you'll recall, that one of the reasons staff has been supportive of MISTA and LIHTC projects in the past is as part of that process, the developer also has to set aside long-term maintenance funds so that over the course of the loan, maintenance can be continued throughout the entire project. The reason is to prevent exactly these type of situations where developments sit and don't have continued maintenance on them.
So if this doesn't pass, is there, my assumption, my business mind tells me that somehow, shape, or manner, this will turn into a higher income facility where these people will eventually lose their houses. Am I correct in saying that? Because you can't afford to stay in business if you're losing money.
So there are requirements that this property continue to serve the clientele that it's serving. Those are through different HUD contracts that it has. So it can't just tomorrow flip and decide to become market rate serving a different population. But the challenge that the developer currently has is because of those same contracts and their inability to raise the level of rent that they can capture for revenue, they can't make investments back into the product. So they're really in a difficult situation right now, trying to figure out how to make those improvements when they can't raise the rent. So to your point, I don't know what would happen. I don't have my magic ball with me tonight, but it would be very challenging for the property to move away from the position that it's in because of the long-term contracts tied to providing affordable housing for that subsection of our population.
My assumption is at some point in time it would get sold and these people would lose their houses. I don't know how else that wouldn't happen.
That is an eventual likelihood.
I'm not saying tomorrow, and I understand that, but over the course of time, I mean, they can't afford to run at a loss.
Correct. My bigger fear, though, would be that it sells to someone who tries to keep it in there. Right now, we have no challenges from a rental inspections perspective. The owners do a tremendous job keeping the property maintained. Future owners may not be as respectful.
So does this help us when we're looking for state funding, that we're showing that we're helping with low-income housing, for housing shortage, for all of these things that we're doing? Do we get better access to state funds because we're being proactive on this? In a roundabout way, I know.
That's a loaded question.
I got more.
So there are quite a few grants or other funding sources which do look at how cities kind of manage affordable housing. Are we taking steps as well as asking developers to take steps? And this would certainly check those boxes in terms of being able to provide the tools we have available as a municipality to ensure affordable housing can remain, while also asking the developer to utilize the other tools at their disposal as well.
So it can and will be used as a benefit to us in some sort of a manner when we're asking for grants or things that are similar to that.
Affordable housing right now is a very pressing topic, not only in the county, but nationally. And I think any time that you can demonstrate that you are working towards the goals you've outlined in your master plan and your strategic plan to provide that affordable housing, that alignment is a good thing.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
So our intent would be to put this on the agenda for the September 15th, next week's meeting, for final reading. If you recall, we had first reading of this ordinance a month ago, 3 weeks ago, because the council would have to make a decision on this prior to the October 1st deadline for the developer to apply for those low-income housing tax credits. So our intention, unless I hear from the majority of you saying heck no, would be to put this on the agenda.
I'd say move it forward.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if there's any place in the city that this belongs, this is like the poster child of places that we should use this, I think. So any objections? Okay. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Godwin Mercado Liquor Sales and Services. John.
So Krishan's coming up here to give a presentation on a proposal for the city to sell and serve alcoholic beverages at the Godwin Mercado. And she's going to present how that would happen and the business case for doing that as well.
Thank you, John. Hi, hello. It's great to be here again this evening. My voice is doing strange things tonight, so I'm going to do my best in my tenor that I'm using tonight. I sound a little low in my sound, but all right. So like John said, we're going to talk about the Godwin Mercado. I'm going to outline a little bit of the business plan for the facility because we talked about that a couple different times. I'm going to talk about a few different alcohol service options. We're going to run through the financial impacts of that, and then we're going to talk about what next steps would look like towards bringing that forward. So I first want to just run through, excuse me, sorry, one moment, jumped ahead of myself. So from the beginning of this project, staff has shared many ways in which, direct input from the community has informed the project, and that's from the design and the construction phase to the operations that we see here today. So that's led to the mission and just goals that we've outlined here for the facility. So that mission that we've come up with includes that the market exists to connect the community with fresh, locally grown food while celebrating the diverse cultures and vibrant spirit of Wyoming by supporting local growers, makers. We're fostering health, economic opportunity, meaningful connections, and a welcoming space for everybody. Some of our goals that we've pinpointed and on here are increasing access to fresh, healthy food, promoting community health and wellness, fostering entrepreneurial growth, and strengthening community connections. Some of these things you've seen before, but I'm going to run through just our operations generally. So the Godwin Mercado, primarily we're going to focus on that farmers market activity. So that's activities taking place Sundays from May through October. So that's a full market season. We did a lot of research in determining what the day, what the best time, what's the best for vendors, what's the best for customers, what's the best for farmers. We've landed on Sundays. Again, as we go through this, we will definitely be evaluating as we go year to year and whether or not that stays the same day. But we are also looking at adding a weekday market likely in the second year. So likely a Thursday market will be included in the second year to be able to get some access for during the day, evening hours during the week as well. In addition to that, so private reservations, which we're going to talk a little bit more about. So opening up the space, our intention actually is to open up the space in October, so coming up here real soon, to be available to the public for things like weddings, receptions, birthday parties, corporate events, grad parties, anything you can think of. We likely will be able to use this space for that. It's a very versatile space. And we've already brought those fees to you all, and you approved those back in July. So in our research and in talking to community, we know that alcohol service is pretty highly sought after for private rentals and events. So we wanted to go through and explore what that could look like and what that looks like financially. In addition to market days, so private events are likely Thursday through Saturday. What are you probably thinking? What are we doing during the week? So more than likely during the week, when available, would be making that available for additional private rentals. So corporate events, I could see those taking place during the week. But in addition to that, we also will have a space for additional recreation programming. And that could include things like fitness classes, nutritional programs, classes for some of our entrepreneurs to be able to see themselves as vendors in this space to get them ready for that type of opportunity. I will also add before I jump to the next slide. So in going through our public input process in 2024, we spent a lot of time talking to the community, talking to vendors, talking to farmers, talking to all sorts of people about what they want in this space. And based on that input and input from you all, we know that we're looking to really maximize revenue and gain that cost recovery goal for this space. So with that intention in mind is where you'll kind of see where some of our research takes us in the next slides here. So after lots of research, which included reviewing things with the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, the MLCC, and their requirements, contacting with other municipalities around the state, discussions with our city attorney, discussions with our city manager. We've had discussions with MMRMA, public safety, and a variety of other city departments about this endeavor. We have 3 different options of what alcohol service could look like at the Mercado. So in the first option, that is the city would hold its own license and contracts with a caterer to serve the alcohol. In that scenario, the city could get its own liquor license, but under Michigan law, it would have to handle both the sales and service of the alcohol itself. We would not be able to delegate that to an unlicensed caterer, so that would limit you being able to bring in your own food and then service connected that way. That would mean, again, hiring staff such as temporary bartenders to serve the alcohol at events. If the city wanted a caterer to handle the alcohol service, the caterer must then hold its own liquor license with a catering permit. Some of the pros to that, it's a lesser staff burden. Cons then, it's a total loss of revenue because we would not be able to take in any of the sales in that scenario. And then it's also a loss of control. When you bring in a separate caterer, you're kind of running by their standards. Being able to do that in-house, ensures a level of control, compliance, that sort of thing that we would be looking for. In the second scenario, the city would hold its own license and hire its own staff to serve the alcohol. The city could apply for a municipal civic center liquor license for the Mercado, which would allow liquor sales at scheduled events without counting against the city's quota licenses, which is really key there. So this would not pull from any of the quota of licenses that the city holds for other businesses. This option would give the city full control and the ability to generate the most revenue, since it would directly purchase alcohol and sell the alcohol directly. This option comes with the responsibilities and some risks. So it's handling wholesale purchases, its inventory, its compliance with liquor laws, staff training, and just maybe a general increased liability could be the perception there. I just read the pros, but the cons, but the pros include, we'd have full revenue. So that would be the maximum we would get back revenue wise would be in this scenario. It'd be optimal compliance. So we would be in control. We would be hired. These would be city staff members that we would be hiring. We'd be able to ensure the training and compliance and liability for those staff members in this scenario. In the third scenario, the city uses a preferred caterers list with each caterer holding their own license. So under this approach, alcohol service could only occur at private events where guests are not charged for entry. So they could not be charged for entry. You could not be charged for food, drinks, or services. So this would mean no option of a cash bar, no fundraiser with alcohol. Benefits here are a reduced level of liability, lower administrative costs, and no need to manage alcohol purchasing or licensing or staff training. However, the downsides are pretty clear. That means you wouldn't be able to have a ticketed, charged event where alcohol service would take place. It would limit, fundraisers, types of event, and we could not host revenue. Like I'm saying, you couldn't host any revenue generating events in this space. So very limited in the amount of money that we would bring in. So again, the cons, loss of revenue, inconsistent quality. I think any time that we have to bring someone else in and rely on their level of service or quality, it's going to be much different compared to if it were our own staff. Pros, again, it's a moderate level of oversight, but again, really limits the type of events we'd be able to move forward with. So based on all of that information, bearing in mind those 3 options, option 2 was identified as the best approach for our cost recovery goals and best experience for residents. So the Civic Center Class C license would need to be held by the city. Again, this does not impact the quota licenses that are sought after by other businesses or needed for other purposes around the city right now. In this scenario, we have already budgeted here in Parks and Recreation for the Mercado operations for the staff to cover private events. So in our planning, we were already planning to have event assistants who would attend events, whether there's alcohol or not alcohol. So if you come in and you want an event, there's going to be a person there that will assist you throughout your evening or whatever you have going on. Those same staff would then be trained to serve alcohol through the well-known, very reputable Serve Safe training, which is an industry standard. We've also developed a responsible alcohol policy and an alcohol service plan, which I'll talk a little bit more about. But those plans outline service guidelines, compliance, oversight, safety, secure storage, inventory, and training of staff. This would offer a really safe and consistent guest experience. This is an approach that's been vetted again by our own internal public safety department. We've talked about this with MMRMA, who don't have any, and neither of those bodies have concerns about this approach. The city already holds a DRAM shop liability insurance, which is what MMRMA was recommending, and that's something that we already hold at this time, so there wouldn't be any additional cost or impact to our premiums for this coverage. Jumping in a little bit more to the responsible of alcohol service. So this would be some of the main points that we would be highlighting with the staff who would be trained to serve in this area. So some of the highlights of this training, and again, this is a training that, you know, if you work at any type of event venue, if you work at a bar, if you work at a restaurant, this is the same level of training that those staff members go through and receive. If you work at Van Andel Arena or DeVos Place downtown, this is the same level of training. We've kind of taken it up a notch to be a bit more conservative and are requiring some things that maybe some other locations don't, and we could vet those in the future if we feel like that's not necessary, but we wanted to get, you know, an optimal level of limited liability and just really great service. So some of those highlights include ID checks, potentially wristbands. If you've been to an event, you know, you could go and instead of showing your ID each time you go to the bar, you can instead show your ID and get a wristband on your wrist. It's not a requirement. That would have to be for every event. That would be at the preference of the person or the person that's reserving the space for that evening for whatever type of event it was. A 1 drink per guest at a time requirement. No service to intoxicated guests, and an incident reporting system. The city already, because we do a lot of different activities, already has a pretty great system for incident reporting. So if there were any sort of situation that took place, an intoxicated guest, variety of different scenarios that could happen, we would use that same system that we've already established for city employees across the board. In this slide, I just want to talk a little bit, in order to apply for the license through the MLCC, we have to identify where the service area will be. So this is kind of like a funky picture, but it just shows, for those of you that have been to the Mercado, where the service area would be. And this is very easy for us to identify where these barriers and barricades would need to take place based on how the facility was built. So like, thank you to our folks who provided the construction for this space to make it really easy to be able to create. There's physical barriers around the facility already, but this just highlights, you know, we'd want people to be able to drink alcohol on the plaza, but also in these outside areas, and are easily able to sort of barrier off these areas, which is what would be required by the state. In addition to that, secure storage is required. So in the, we've got storage areas already outlined and have already looked at what would be required to securely store alcohol when we're not doing an activity, which is a requirement in that inventory tracking. We'd have event-specific bar setups, so we would again work with whoever is the person renting the space to confirm what type of setup they would want for their event. And then again, likely a last call 30 minutes before an event, which is pretty standard. If you, just as a reminder, right now, we're only set up for this venue to have a maximum of 150 guests, and then all events end at 10 o'clock. So we want to, it's 10 o'clock. It's not going to get, like, we're not planning to make service any later than that. So your event will end at 10. So that means the service would end at 9:30. We want to stay in a pretty conservative approach beginning this activity, just to sort of see how it works in a first year and, you know, potentially make changes for that in the future if we needed to, but want to start at a pretty modest level as we're approaching this. So I'm going to run through some financial projections for the market operations. Few things to bear in mind as I go through these numbers. The process to actually receive the license from the MLCC, once we get through all of our approvals and ordinance changes that we would be required here. It actually takes 2 to 5 months before the MLCC might return with a response to the application. So based on that, I'm using these numbers as projections starting in FY27, because by the time we get to, if it takes the maximum of 5 months, we're basically in FY27 at that point. So I want to just set that as a baseline so you understand where we're at when we start running through this. So year one, I wanted to give you a comparison of year one without alcohol and year two if we included alcohol service. So you'll see expenses, total expenses expected is $254,865. Of the expenses, those are mostly people expenses, which is, you know, in looking at the city budget, that's a lot of what the city is. And that's one full-time staff member, which is already employed. That's our market manager. And that is those part-time positions already in there too, those event assistants and a market assistant that will assist with that. Supplies are just all sorts of things. That's the supplies for the office. That's the supplies just for the day-to-day to get the work done in the space. And then other services includes things like equipment. It's our utilities. It's things like that. So a lot of these are, again, estimates. It's a brand new building. We've estimated what we think a year of utilities is going to cost, but in a brand new, pretty nicely done facility where we've leaned on a kind of lower side, but a lot of these numbers honestly are based on other facilities that we have around the city and some guesses based on that. Revenue, we're estimating a total of $135,000 in that first year. That includes vendor fees, which you'll note the vendor fees are very small. In order for us to be an attractive farmers market location, we really wanted to keep those numbers comparable, but also a little bit under other markets around us, because we're trying to prove a concept to farmers and other vendors that they should come and vend with us without making it an amount that's going to take them on. They're not going to want to come and be a vendor. If we don't have vendors, we won't get people. If we don't have people, there won't be vendors. It's kind of a chicken and the egg sort of thing. So those numbers are pretty nominal. The rental fees, we're estimating $90,000 there. Additional programming is at $20,000, and then sponsorship is at 10. Can't see that number in there, but total of $135,000 there in the first year. Second year with alcohol, you'll notice a pretty significant change. So expenses, because again, so if we are purchasing directly, there is some expense to us buying the alcohol. So we would be purchasing directly through the MLCC. The return on that is quite significant though. So in total expenses, $312,000 and $615,000. I can say numbers. And then the revenue is at $205,000 with that change. So in this first year, cost recovery is not great if you look at this. So without alcohol, we're only at a 53% cost recovery rate. So that's a subsidy of about $120,000, which is significant. If we look at the scenario with alcohol in their productions, that's a 92% cost recovery rate, which is much better. That's a $20,000 subsidy, something to make up there. That's a little bit more palatable, and I would say a modest investment into a community space in Parks and Recreation. If you look at year 2 and 3, things change quite significantly. So in year 2, because based on this model, the more volume of alcohol you purchase, the less it costs when you're purchasing it directly through the MLCC. So in year 2, this is sort of taking a moderate look at what services would be. That takes our expenses to $329,300, and then takes the actual revenue up to $391,880,000. This is without too much shift in the expenses that we plan. There's a little bit, in personnel, just to bring that up based on cost of living, things like that, but not too much different than that first year. But in that year 2, that's 119% cost recovery. So that's meeting our costs above and beyond, and that's a pretty good estimate. Year 3, also estimating, you'll see again a pretty significant increase. That's $322,500 in expenses, and then $410,000 $880 in revenue. That's 127% cost recovery. A few things to share here because these are based on a lot of assumptions, right? So we're averaging a guest count of 100 to 150 guests. This is assuming that a guest drinks 2 to 3 drinks for a 3 to 4 hour event. A drink price typically in a venue of this size is $6 to $8 for beer and wine. We're likely leaning on just starting with beer and wine, but potential with some mixed drink offerings. A mixed drink maybe $8 to $10. So if I just had to like flat rough math, I'm not like a math person, but if we had 100 guests, they had 2.5 drinks per person, $7 average drink price. That's $1,750 in alcohol sales per event is sort of the assumption that we worked with to get to this. So this is also taking into account, there will be some internally hosted events. So we've got some blackout dates. We know when farm market starts, we probably don't want to go crazy on events in our first year that we do this. So we likely will have some weekends that we black out and don't allow private rentals on those weekends. So this isn't looking at 52 weeks a year with every single weekend rented. We're going to have a few weekends that come out of the mix a bit here. Also, not every event will include alcohol. So it's really hard to sort of guess what the need or palpability will be for the community. We're not going to have every single, like a birthday party, every single thing isn't going to need alcohol service. So I tried to really use a conservative number in putting this together just so you can sort of see. But even if we didn't do every single event, this shows you the major impact to the revenue that having this as an option would have. Community impact, I just want to reiterate, going this route, looking at those numbers, it really puts the market in a stronger financial sustainability. It expands the appeal of it as an event venue in Wyoming. We literally have only heard good things. Since this has been under construction, we have gotten call after call, people asking when it's available, when they can rent it. I think that right now we probably have a rental interest list that has probably 100 people waiting to be able to rent this space. So the demand is there. The demand is high, not just for it as a venue, but also to be able to have the option to serve alcohol in there as well. Some of the next steps, and I also am going to kind of pivot and talk a little bit about safety. If there's any specific questions about safety, Kip is here and able to provide a little bit more impact. But I just want to lay out if depending on the appetite agreement thoughts for tonight, we would have some ordinance amendments that would be needed. So we would likely bring those to the meeting next week to start amending those ordinances to be able to exclude the Godwin Mercado from those specific ordinances to allow this activity. And then we'd have to adopt a resolution authorizing us to apply for the license. And then we would sort of move forward from there. That was a lot. I'm sure you have questions.
Any questions?
So Krishan, back to your slide or two back where you had the projections, just wondering, that one there, yeah. So like looking at year 2, the venue will be available Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays over the course of the whole year, right?
Yes.
So how many, so that'd be like potentially 150 dates.
Yes.
What did you use as a projection of how many events we might host?
132.
Okay, so you're going to fill it up pretty much.
Yes.
Okay, and of those 132, you counted on, not counted on, but you included alcohol sales at all of them?
Yes. I didn't want to, so it was hard we were estimating, right? So if I'm estimating and there's 150 possible, I wanted to take a number that included what we might see happen. Right. It's a little difficult.
I think that's ambitious, and I'm not sure you'll have 132 events that will request alcohol.
Yeah.
And I can just counter that with a little bit of anecdotal evidence for the contrary. I know I mentioned before that we did our wedding at a Kent County park that had like a pavilion that was enclosed like this. And in order to book it, we had to log on. It was only like a year in advance that you could book it. So we had to like choose our date, choose our top 3 locations, and like log on at midnight. And by the time I refreshed the page right at midnight, my first 2 options were already taken and we got our 3rd option. So I do think there's a huge demand for this kind of thing. I don't know about Thursdays, but definitely for Fridays and Saturdays for sure.
Who would rent it on a Thursday night?
If you want to save a bit in the cost of a wedding, I mean, there's a lot of folks that are looking for a wedding or reception potentially on a Thursday night. I could see corporate events on a Thursday night. I could see, there's a lot of different things. We currently rent the lodge, and the lodge rents all days. Weeknights, like it's not, I mean, it's usually booked every single weekend of the year, but there's a significant amount of just, whether it's a business meeting, there's a lot of different uses.
High school graduation open houses.
Yeah.
So you did talk about maybe not having it open certain times. Were those Friday and Saturday nights you were planning on not having it open?
No, we plan to have it available Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, knowing that we have to flip the whole thing during the summer for a farmer's market Sunday morning.
Yeah, I just like to make sure it's available every Friday and every Saturday. And it sounds like you're thinking that.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Go.
I'll go back to my list. Go
You
ahead.
keep going with yours.
Well, I got a lot of stuff written down here. So, going back to the employees, the one running the alcohol sales, I mean, whoever that is, I'm sure it's not going to be just one person, but is it possible to make them? I've got seasonal written down, like we would hire a seasonal park employee. I guess what I'm trying to stay away from is hiring more full-time staff. And
Yes.
I don't know what your plans are. I don't know if you can elaborate on that. By the way, I love your voice. It's very commanding tonight. So.
Thank you. I'll bring this back next week.
We call that a late night radio voice. I guess, what are you thinking as far as that person, that group of people?
Yeah.
Is that the same person that could be there, managing the cleanup afterwards? I'm assuming these are all things that.
Yeah, so we right now already have a full-time market manager. The intent is not to add a full-time person in this current scenario. So that market manager would really be the primary person that's leading the event assistants, which would be the temporary part-time people under them. In a lot of places, these are college students. These are, people maybe looking for sort of a side gig type of thing, just want to work a couple nights and weekends to make a little bit of extra money. There would be responsibility for all of those people to understand and do the training to be able to serve the alcohol. But the market manager and like myself and Lynn, for example, we're sort of the supervisory leadership. And then those folks will really be kind of the boots on the ground at the events, providing that service. The market manager likely will be at many of these events in the first year to ensure that things go properly, things like that. So there will be market assistants. And then we also are going to have some farmers market assistants too, just for that function.
And I appreciate the 3-year projection, because I was kind of obstinate about making sure that this thing would be able to cash flow itself. And I appreciate, and I have no problem giving you 3 years to make that work. I think that's fantastic, because obviously by year 2, we're looking pretty good already.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of having control. In my own life, I'm kind of a control freak. My wife will tell you that. I just, even like with our water plant, there's been talk of, do we do this, do we do that? And I love having control of things as a city. When we have control, we can call the shots, we can do it the way we want. So I like that. I'm a little concerned about the curfew, and I know we've talked about, the rates and all of this stuff already, but I would say the curfew is another place where there could be a significant amount of income if we open that up. I'm sure you've thought through it, but it's just something that's running through my mind. 10 o'clock is kind of early.
Yeah.
And if we can make it worth our while and they're willing to pay a significant amount of money to stay later, I'd say let's stay flexible. And
I want to add on to that. I've been to 8 weddings this summer.
Yeah.
Is outrageous, but I can't think of one of them that was done by 10. So you might want to revisit
Yeah.
that to see.
gross.
I mean, we had to stop at 10 because County Park had the same rules.
Yeah,
It was,
I mean,
it was a
if
bummer.
the rule's there and if it makes sense for the neighborhood, we do want to be a good neighbor as well, but it might be something that makes people think twice. But go ahead, Sean.
And I'm far from a wedding coordinator, so I'm not, by no means am I telling you what to do, but I am a late night guy. I stay up a little later than John. Sometimes when he's getting up, I'm going to bed, so. But just a suggestion is all that it is. I think it's another revenue source.
Yeah.
In my mind, I'm just thinking business-wise, I think we could create a little bit more impact financially that way, maybe catch up a little quicker.
Good feedback.
And do you have, is it only going to be when we say the alcohol sales are okay, is it always going to be a per drink, or is it something you can buy the service and then go up to a certain amount? What does that look like?
Yeah, so once we hold the license, we are really kind of in control of how we provide the service. So typically what happens, we'll work with whoever is going to rent the space, determine what their menu is going to be. We would purchase that directly through the MLCC. And then we set the rate, the cost of what each drink would be for the event that would take place. So we don't want to set the drink rate to be out of market or out of some, we don't want it to be an extremely high rate. We want to cover that cost through the cost that the renter would pay for that.
Yeah, so I guess my thought is, do you give them a package deal where it would be up to a certain amount and then they don't have to worry about every drink that's getting?
Yes, there's options. So we can
Okay.
either go package or we could go like cash.
Once again, I'm not
drink
trying to
options.
micromanage you because
Yeah.
I don't want to. It's just stuff that's running through my head. So
Yeah.
that's my list.
Awesome.
Thank you, Prashant.
Thank you.
Rob.
Hello, thank you for walking us through this. I think you put a lot of thought into it. Couple questions. So I thought I heard you say, though, that your projections begin in fiscal year 27.
Yes.
So we're in 25 right now. So 26.
We're in-
We're in 26.
We're in 26, fiscal year 26 right now.
Okay. My
So
mind.
27 is when it starts next July then.
Yes.
Yeah, fiscal year 27 starts next July 1st.
Okay.
That's year 2.
Okay.
Yeah. So in my head, we start the market in May. We're basically off and running with alcohol sales at least by July, because that would then give us a full year of that
Okay.
at a
So-
modest level.
So we currently already have somebody on staff that's a market manager.
Yes.
Okay. So my concern is just cash flowing it as quickly as we can, and especially with the staffing being a majority of the expense. Is there a way we can be maybe creative with it sooner than later? For example, the market manager or the staff, where you have it more commission or incentive based based on volume that we sell. So then that could drive that versus, again, in the hospitality side, I'd say that have it be a win-win situation. So we're not holding the cards for all the expenses. We're paying flat salary, and people just, when you have salary, let's put a joint skin in the game where we win, they win. Let's incent, potentially give and drive that behavior. I think that would give us maybe a quicker lift.
Yeah.
Just something to think about. I think that would be good. I was even thinking about, could we, for staffing for the time being, even do for a while, maybe do a hybrid approach where we have our market manager, then we use a temporary agency to staff. So we don't have, I think Sheldon was right on as far as just making sure that we don't have full-time staff that are, we're committed to, where we have to pay benefits and all. So if we can avoid that, and maybe we do temporary staffing where the renter then pays for whatever staffing is required, and that's part of that.
Yeah. So in the scenario right now, only the full-time position is a full-time benefited staff person. The temporary staff, in every year, regardless, are folks that are only getting paid when they work. So you are only, when you are scheduled to work an event, you are only paid at that time. They are not benefited employees. They are not, so the expenses to have them on is going to fluctuate. It's going to be only dependent on when there is an event that requires their services to be there.
Okay. And then can you also maybe share, again, what I'm hearing though is from like a staffing hierarchy. So you've got your market manager and you said that person will probably be working the first year, and then, so if after year one, typically whenever you have any type, you're going to need somebody like an on-site manager. So are we going to add more layers? And I guess that's my concern, is what kind of layers, what kind of hierarchy, what is that going to look like? And
Yeah.
the
So
overall expense and what that's going to do. I want to make sure we've got a good thought out plan.
yeah. So right now it's, again, like myself, Lynn, assistant director, a market manager under that, and then there would just be these temporary part-time event staff members, and then we will also have market staff, but that's maybe 1 or 2 people that will just be dedicated to farmers market activities. While I want to say, like, yes, I think that's something that just that string of people can handle, I think as you increase the volume, and if we go crazy and have this volume of actual events and start with this level of service, there are a lot of other impacts. So this is, there's office specialists that we already have in the Parks and Recreation office who are supporting a lot of these background functions. So whether that's the financials, that's the invoices. So while I don't think right now that there's a need, I only know what I can guess. I don't think that there's a need for additional staffing, but I also don't know what I don't know, because this is going to have a pretty major impact to our current operations and what we're looking at and what we're doing. So I'm not projecting anything in addition to this, but I could see a world, where we might need a part-time office specialist or someone to support the background functions of what's going to happen at the market too. As the revenue increases, I would hope there'd be justification for something like that. But I'm trying to plan based on what we have and bodies that we have right now. So these are based on those numbers.
Does that change depending on the model that you have here, though?
Say that again.
For liquor sales, would that change at all between I'm wondering, to Rob's point, it probably is the same no matter which model of these 3 we were to pick. Correct?
Same in terms of staffing?
Yes.
Yes. So I base these models based on the current staffing structure.
So do you feel confident that you're going to be able to find people with bartender skill sets? I know beer and wine is pretty simple.
Yeah.
But as you expand beyond that, are you going to be able to get people that will both do setup and take down and do bar service?
I am pretty confident. There's, Patrick and I have talked a little bit about this, because there's a couple of different college programs that are focused on hospitality and tourism management. And a lot of those folks are looking for this type of experience to be the one that takes you from the beginning of an event, walks you through what it looks like, your layout, but also can be scrappy enough to kind of do that service during the event. There's already sort of a community that's doing that around the Grand Rapids area and with our local colleges, where we've got some good relationships. So I'm pretty confident about it, but I'm going to be honest, we're likely training all of our current recreation staff to be able to serve in this function, just to be able to be a backup to a backup. We don't want to get in a scenario where we've only got these folks that can do this thing, and then suddenly nobody's available or something happens and someone quits. And we like to cover our bases. So I will be trained to serve alcohol, because that's just what we do, because we want to make sure that we can continue. If we set an expectation, we don't want to be able to not hold that based on staffing.
Other questions?
So if you went to that model, so if you had somebody from Parks and Rec that filled in, are you paying a premium then for those people to do it, or what does that look like?
They would be paid their same wage that they are paid normally.
Okay.
So I couldn't take a rec programmer and change their pay for that one activity, but it wouldn't also be overtime if that's where you're going to.
So what you said, it would not, or it could?
No.
So you'd have like comp time that they would say, hey, if you work this shift, you wouldn't have to, you'd be off a half day or something.
Mayor? Do you have a question?
Yeah, a couple of things. I do think the cost projections are high, or the revenue projections are high based on the numbers. I can get into that, but I want to state that. Secondly, I think, well, maybe primarily, I want to think about the whole reason we're talking about this. You know, what's our goal? And if our goal is to just increase the revenue, then I think it makes sense to go with option 2, where we control it and sell it. But if our intent is to make it a more desirable venue to compete with other venues at a fair price that currently allow the caterer or an outside bartender to come in, then I would be in favor of that first. But if we're just talking money, I know this makes sense. I would rather not have the city of Wyoming become the bartender, become the seller of the alcohol. I would rather have it be where we encourage events to come in and rent the facility from us, and maybe they pay more if they're going to have alcohol service. Maybe we get a commission off that. I don't know, but I'm a little reluctant to just jump in with both feet on that option 2. I do want to think about it more.
Well, I was questioning with that, Mr. Mayor, I was thinking if they're going to have an event with alcohol sales, does that increase the rent price for that event?
I think it should.
I think it should too, because our risk and liability, I think, is greater. And then who's going to handle all the cash that comes in? I mean, that's a big deal. You could get robbed. People are going to know these employees are going to have a lot of cash on hand. How are we going to provide the safety and the security for probably the event manager, the market manager, of being safe with all this cash on hand? Are we going to have a police officer right there ready to take them to the bank with the bank thing and deposit it? Or that's huge.
You could just have it cash, credit card only.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of the venues are going, is
Yeah.
it's cashless. So, I mean, that
Just have a jar for
from a
tips.
safety standpoint.
Yeah, I was going to say, then what do you do for tips? But
And plus, if it's like a wedding or something, it's not like the guests are going to be the ones, you know what I mean? Like the person is just going to get a bill from us, the person that would
Yes.
rent it, I would think.
okay.
It's like a package that the renter would purchase through us. It's not really like sale, unless they choose a cash bar. It wouldn't be, and a cash bar is not necessarily physical cash. It's more than likely credit card sales.
Okay.
Krishan, do venues have, in your research, did you find any venues that have a set fee for the event and charge another fee for the outside bar service to come in?
Yes, that's almost every venue.
Okay, so that would increase our revenues without us selling the liquor, the alcohol.
Well, not in that scenario. I don't. So if we are the event venue and we bring in a caterer, then the renter is then working with that caterer for that option. We cannot profit any sales in that scenario at all.
Okay. I think I get it.
Well, what I was thinking about this and I was reading this, we can't serve alcohol in the parks. We can't serve alcohol at the communities, at the senior center. We can't sell alcohol here. And then our motto is at the Mercado, fresh, healthy, health and wellness. It really doesn't equal alcohol consumption. And that's my other big takeaway. And with all the shenanigans that can happen when people are belligerent and having alcohol, I don't know if we really want to go there.
My feeling is if we're going to be a competitive venue and even come close to the numbers that you're projecting, I'm glad we get 100 on a waiting list. We're going to have to probably allow for at least beer and wine. I'm just not sure we need to sell it. So I'm still stuck in that.
Yeah, I don't want to be responsible.
I think you'll be at a big disadvantage if you don't at least offer it in some form. But
Like what, beer and alcohol or
Yeah,
beer and wine?
beer and wine or probably full liquor sales. I think if you're going to get the wedding events, yeah, I think you'll lose a lot of potential bookings if you don't have that as an option. Not everybody's going to choose it, but they do look for it. I did not want to go to that many weddings this summer, but every one of them had that as an option there. So I didn't go to one dry wedding all summer. So
Did every person at the wedding drink 2 or 3 drinks?
I don't know for
No.
sure, but there were a lot of drinks served. So,
Yeah, but not everybody
Yeah.
drinks either.
Rob, did you have a question?
Sorry, just my mind is working. And so I see in this, as far as the expense side, under the other supply, well, is there any allocation to the building itself, the expense that we put into this building? Or is that a gift to the community that's not even factored into the ROI? Is there anything, when we talked about the other day about the lawn equipment, is there anything in there pertaining to the support services that are done from our lawn maintenance and snow plowing and what have you? Is that in this as well as allocated expenses to run this? I guess I'm just trying to think of, when we truly are doing this, if we're running this like a business, are we having that factored in and we truly getting a return on investment calculation? I don't want to be a stickler, but I also want to make sure, again, as a steward of the city and the city's resources, we need to make sure that we're mindful of all things that go into this and all expenses, as well as the offset and the revenues. And I want us to look at how do we ramp the revenues up to more than cover. And again, in my mind, from a business side, typically you run a 3-to-1 ratio of, for every dollar you spend, you should make $3 for everything. So just as we think about where we're going, we need to start, I want that to be kind of a mindset as we look at that.
Yeah.
It's just my editorial from my perspective.
No, that's helpful. This is just based on direct costs. So this is not factoring in all of the things that you mentioned. This is just the direct cost to the facility and the venue. But I could come up with those numbers, and I don't think that it takes us too far off where we are, because this does include like utilities, but it doesn't include capital to the building.
Because I think, even down the way, we're going to have systems that will have wear and tear. We'll have a refrigerator that needs to be replaced. The roof is going to go out. Those things, we need to make sure that that's in that built in. So we've got allocations for it, or at least set aside reserves for it. So, and I would rather have that and would not pull from general fund at all, now or in the future.
Don't we already have a system in place for that, though, with like all of our capital for all of the different facilities that we own?
Yeah, we put together a 6-year capital improvement plan that outlines our priorities for capital projects, not just here, but all of our facilities. And then we fund that through a variety of sources, whether it's the general fund, water and sewer fund, depending on what that project is. With Guywood Mercado, I think we're really looking at, I've heard from the council that they want this to be as self-sufficient as possible, as quickly as possible. And with that in mind, we really feel that with the city selling and serving the alcohol, that will generate the max amount of revenue to cover those expenses and then even exceed those expenses so that we can set money aside to cover some of those future capital costs. I think things like, I know that was just an example, like grass cutting. I mean, whether we serve alcohol or not, we're gonna have the same expense grass cutting. That won't have any impact. But there may be other expenses that go up, obviously, because of the sale of alcohol. These are projections. The actual results are likely to be different because there's a lot of assumptions we have to make. But we really do feel that the city selling and serving the alcohol is the best option in terms of the demand that we're hearing from people, as well as trying to follow council's desire to make this as financially self-sufficient as possible.
Yeah. So I think that's what we're trying to focus on. Us which of these three options do we want to do? And I think council has been pretty clear. We hope that this is able to take care of itself over time. And it's looking like the option that's being recommended is the most likely to be able to do that. But what we need to decide tonight is next meeting, is that the option that we want to come forward for serving alcohol? Or do we want to do something different?
You're saying this would come forward at our next meeting?
Well, part of this is if we are to proceed with this, we do have to start the process of amending a couple of city ordinances that would allow the sale of alcohol. So,
But we do
for
have 10
example,
months to do that, correct?
what's that?
We have 10 months till next July for that.
No, we would need to start the process immediately for the ordinance.
Okay, for the ordinance changes?
Yeah, because then there's also an application process with the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, which I think can take up to 5 months just to get a response from them on our application request. So if this is something that the council is in support of, we would start the process at the next meeting with the first reading to amend those ordinances that address alcohol in our city code.
So you'd want to do that next week?
That would be our recommendation.
Okay.
But that's why we also brought it here to
Yeah.
get council's feedback, obviously.
So I'm not ready to move on it as early as next week under option 2, but I'm willing to have it go to the meeting next week and vote on whatever.
So let's look at it this way. Would the ordinance changes need to occur no matter which option other than not selling alcohol we went? So we could handle at least that part of it the next meeting.
Yeah, the next meeting would be first reading, so it's not an official approval till the final reading, and it has to do with the ability to have alcohol at a city property, whether we sell it directly or whether a caterer
I can go with that.
sells it.
Does that answer your question, Rob? Because I'm a little unclear yet as to what you just said. Does the ordinance change whether we're selling it or somebody else sells it? Can we
Yes.
get that in motion?
Yeah, so we would have to amend the ordinance regardless.
Regardless of
Whether
which of
we-
the three scenarios? I mean, is there
Yes.
something
Right.
that we can move forward with?
The only reason we wouldn't is if we're not going to sell alcohol at all or allow it to be sold.
Correct.
So we can make the decision on who's providing it later. Perfect.
Obviously, when we want to do an application with the Michigan Liquor Control Commission, we have to tell them what kind of license we're applying for and who would be serving that. And obviously, that's I think you said a 2 to 5 month process.
Yeah.
So obviously, the longer we wait to make a decision on that, the longer, we can wait to apply for that and get a decision from the Michigan Liquor Control Commission.
And when did if this went through this month, when would we start that process? Immediately?
Yes. Well, we'd have to have all the ordinances amended. So we'd have next week
Maybe
and
the
then
end of
another,
October, we would probably start.
another 30
Okay.
days.
So within the next month, we probably need to decide what we're going to
So
do.
maybe, okay.
Question for John and Greg, I guess. Could the ordinance be written in such a way that it would be allowing alcohol to be sold or available at Wyoming? Does it have to be specific to Garden Mercado? Could this be something that could apply to the lodge at Pine Park? That could apply somewhere else?
That's what I was thinking too, Mayor. I was thinking the same
I believe
thing.
it could. I think we were looking at, we were unsure of the council's opinion on making it
Well-
so widespread. We were really focusing just on this.
Well, if we're going to take the step, I think,
So when you rent that lodge, do you have staff on hand at all times? The entire time that's,
Well, it's a little different. We'd have to adjust our model. It's maintenance staff right now that let you in and out of the lodge. It's not the same as what we were planning here, which this would be like a person that kind of runs you through and keeps you through your whole event. They sort of unlock the door for you and leave. So we'd have to make some adjustments, but if your intention is to let me loose in other facilities, then
I could see maybe like if someone's renting out the senior center for a private event because it's like an enclosed thing. I feel like the parks makes me a little nervous just because it's more it kind of spills out into the public a little bit more instead of just like, this is your space. So,
The senior center or the library, community room.
yeah.
We can always modify it after the fact. So
I'd rather test it in one location
yeah, that's
before.
you have a
rolling it
controlled
out.
test
Okay.
environment. And if we nail it, then we might say, hey, let's give this more thought. My concern is kind of staffing, what kind of controls do we have in place?
So would it makes,
Patrick,
I just have something, and correct me if I'm wrong, Greg, but this is a civic center license that's specific to this building.
Yes.
So you wouldn't be able to use that in any other city facilities. This is an exception carve out to the liquor ban in our park. So if you're going to change it in the lodge, for example, that would mean people would be allowed to bring their own to the parks, but we wouldn't be serving it under this license.
I was just wondering.
But we could theoretically get a civic license for the senior center or like we could theoretically apply for those just like we're applying for this, correct?
They're kind of restrictive on the type of facility. Yeah, that's something we could look into, but yeah, possibly.
Okay.
We'd have to see if they meet the definition of the facility. I'm not sure that they would in the same way that the Mercado does.
would it, I'm sorry.
Just one other question, quick. Is there any precedent in other communities for what they're doing?
Yes. A variety of different things are happening in different communities. So an actual civic license in the same manner the city of Kentwood is currently pursuing. They're doing this I'm looking at Greg because he just told me the name, City of Portage?
Port Huron.
Port Huron.
It depends on the events that you're using. We also had a county that had a civic center, a center authority that did wedding events, and the city did too. They had approved caterers, which works well with weddings and things because then they can get their flowers, their alcohol package, everything that goes with the weddings. And they also opened it up, which, I had concerns way early on, but it worked out pretty well and we haven't had any problems there. Open it up to the sales where staff would do the sales, and they had a gated garden area where they could have events and the community came and, the city attorney's always worried about liability, but we haven't seen really any cases out of it. Haven't seen a lot of cases statewide out of it. As long as you have good training, good staff, it's been a fact where the community liked it. Of course, that's council's prerogative, what the community should do. My worries were reserved after seeing it for a while, and I was on the McMorran Authority board that did that for 5 or 6 years, and we didn't have a lot of problem liability issues. I'm sure that can come up, and I know they can come up. You never know. When you add alcohol into the mix, there's more potential for liability. But we didn't have a lot of problems.
Yeah, not the same type of license. I mean, Marissa already mentioned the county offers it in parks, Grand Rapids offers it, Walker, Kentwood in parks, not in their community center. And I mean, communities all around the state have some level of some type of offering, whether it's in a park, in a facility.
When you say they offered or they just allow it?
Allow it, excuse me.
It's okay. So Ludington we allowed alcohol in our parks, and our parks were heavily used, especially during the tourist season. Never really had an issue with it at all. I mean, there were certain hours of the day that it was allowed. Couldn't have glass bottles, for example, that type of thing. And it really was not an issue from a community or law enforcement point of view.
So I want to have Kelly speak to something in a minute because she just mentioned that we did allow this in parks for one special event.
I'm dusting off recollections from the city's 50th anniversary celebration in 2009. So, Mayor, I don't know if you can help me with this, but we did have a upscale special dinner at Lamar Park. There was a tent. We served beer and wine there, and the council did waive the requirements of the ordinance. They waived alcohol at the parks for that. I believe there was a partnership with a nonprofit in order to facilitate that, but that wasn't a city-held license necessarily. It was a one-day special event. So there are mechanisms to do this,
Right.
depending on the.
We did it at one of our Community Enrichment Commission events over there too. That day where they had the bounce houses and the bands and all. that.
Yes.
I remember a little fenced in there.
I remember that too.
So it sounds to me like we have some discussion to have yet about what version we go after. But is everybody in favor of moving forward with the ordinance change so that we can do something at Godwin? And if we want to talk about the other facilities, we can do some more of that too. But I just don't want us to drift so far off that we're not handling the particular task we're trying to address tonight. Any concerns, thoughts? Somebody want to ban it completely?
Kyle, we haven't heard from you.
The only point of interest I had was Serve Safe, which it sounds like you want to have the whole staff on that. So those fees are nominal. It's can be done in a day. It's easy peasy, really. Outside of that, the logistics of storing and transporting alcohol will be fun. Good luck.
Sounds like you're in support though. Mayor, support for the
Yes,
ordinance
I am.
piece?
Yes, I am.
Marissa? Renee? Rob?
Yeah, I'm in support of pursuing this. I think we just still have to get back to, I think, Mayor, you had talked about, what's our why and what are we as a city providing, and making sure we stick to what our city is. And that's where I'm kind of wrestling with this. And I don't want it to be expansive where we add lots of staff to do something that maybe isn't a specific city service, but I'm working through it. As long as we have a good, finely tuned game plan and a budget that's going to execute, I'm okay with it. I just don't want it to be something we're going to end up having our general fund cover for anything like that and spill over and have staff ads that don't cover for themselves. So that's where I'm wrestling with. So.
And I think this proposal is to try to address that concern that we can minimize the amount of time that the general fund or any city fund is subsidizing these operations. And that's why we're making this proposal, is by the sale and service of alcohol, that would generate the revenue to cover these expenses much more quickly than any other option that we have. Would it make sense for the council, like if we next meeting we'll have first reading of these ordinance changes, and then it comes back at the second meeting in October for final reading, that we would have this proposal again for you where the council can not only just on the ordinances which we provide the alcohol, that would give you over to think through, and that way that second meeting in October would be final reading of these ordinance changes, and then this council on the recommendations for the city to have the liquor license to sell and serve alcohol. Give 5 weeks to think that, whatever that is.
That's fine.
Put that on the agenda then for that second meeting in October.
Everything good? That's what we'll plan on. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Ottawa County Water Agreement. John or Aaron?
Well, Aaron will go through this. This has been a slog. So we have a 1988 agreement with Ottawa County to oversee the providing of water services to Ottawa County, and some of the local units within Ottawa County, and obviously with an agreement that is 35, 40 years old. It has fallen out of date and needed to be updated. Aaron has worked exhaustive number of hours with our former city attorney, with Ottawa County, to update this agreement. I think it involved 4,000 different meetings to do that. And the idea here is really to update our current arrangement and to make sure that the costs that are incurred are paid by the appropriate parties. for that. And it also outlines, we have some operational issues right now where we want to make sure that sometimes we have meaning the water system, not necessarily the city of Wyoming, have these spikes in water demand primarily from communities outside of the city of Wyoming. And in those spikes, if that gets to the point where they reach at least 80% of our capacity to provide water, the state, Eagle, knocks on our door and says, you got to start planning for expansion to your water system, which is extremely expensive. If we can better manage that demand, especially outside the city of Wyoming with some of our wholesale customers, we can delay and put off those very expensive capital projects. And the agreement also addresses that. So Aaron will go through this proposal and kind of give you a summary of where we have really the new agreement would be very similar to the current agreement, where we've had some minor changes and then some significant changes to that.
So thank you, John. And yes, like you said, this has been a slog. We've been working on this since December 2023. And at the end of the presentation here, I'll have a list of names of everybody who's contributed. But so for tonight, for the next couple of minutes here, really talk about the what we're calling the superseding water supply contract. And I've had a couple of conversations with some of you individually along the way here, but this really is the first, holistic presentation of what we've been working on since then. So the agenda for the next little bit here, I'd like to touch on these things, really define the Ottawa County service area, some history and their boundaries, talk about the philosophy in the new contract, how we approached it. As John mentioned, what's the same and what's different, key in on the rates for a little bit, and talk about next steps. And so in the agenda packet tonight, there was a pretty detailed memo about these things. I don't intend to go through each of them with you tonight, but that's more for your information to really take a 20-plus page contract and pare it down into some differences and similarities. So I'm going to hit on some key things tonight, and then I'll try to stop after each slide or so and answer any questions you may have. So the Ottawa County service area. So on this slide here is a map, and it's big. And it is 9 government entities, mostly townships, one city, the city of Hudsonville in there. But this is the service area that Ottawa County represents. So our contract with Ottawa County, Wyoming's contract with Ottawa County, is just with Ottawa County. It is not with each of these 9 wholesale units, thankfully, because I really don't want to have to deal with a contract with 9 on top of the 3.5 other ones we have. So, and we have a great working relationship with Ottawa County. The gentleman's name, my counterpart there, is Pat Staskevich, great guy to work with. And he has been who we've been working with the last year or so. But his job now is to take this contract to those 9 and explain it to them and get them on board. So, so the original contract with Ottawa County was from 1964. With amendments in 1972, 1974, and most recently, 1988. So the current contract that we're working under is 37 years old. So it was high time that it get updated.
Aaron, who does the city of Zeeland contract with?
They're from Holland BPW. Yeah.
Okay.
And so this map has changed a little bit since 1988. So most of the service areas have expanded. You mentioned the city of Zeeland. Theirs has grown a little bit just because of Act 425 agreements. You're familiar with them. And so that city their service area has grown because of that. The overall boundary has grown because of that. And as we look in the new contract, these boundaries are, I'll say, arbitrary. If there's a property on a boundary line and it's serviced either with us or it can get serviced from the city of Grand Rapids, for instance, or Holland BPW, for instance, we're going to do what's in the best interest of that property owner and not make a hard defined line saying, no, this is a boundary, we need to provide service. It's what's in the best interest for that adjoining property at that time. So before we entered into true contract negotiations, they're really just discussions, but we wanted to approach it, what are we trying to achieve here? And so we wanted to use this contract Wyoming did with Ottawa County as a template for the other contracts. We have contracts with Kentwood, Byron Gaines, and Granville. Those were most recently drafted in 2011. And so we wanted to use this as a template that we could use with all of those other adjoining municipalities as well. We wanted something that was easy to explain and administer. Difficult to do in these contracts. There is a lot of complexities, but we wanted to have something that was easy to explain and transparent, that we were not hiding anything. This is a contract, this is what you get. We wanted something that was consistent with industry practice. So, you know, there are a lot of entities like Wyoming that provide water to other wholesale units. And so we looked at Great Lakes Water Authority, for instance. We retained Stantec Consulting to look at our rate model and help us with this. They looked at other contracts and provided us with valuable information to help form and draft this. And I mentioned consistent across all wholesale customers. They are not. As you can imagine, a 2011 contract and a 1988 contract don't align. The rates don't align. The verbiage doesn't align. And our hope was to get all these things aligned on the same page. We wanted it to be fair or equitable for growing and stable customers. You know, this is a challenge. We have growing communities and stable communities. And how do you fairly set rates? How do you fairly define a contract? It's not unique and unusual for us. This is a struggle back in the 60s and 70s and 80s as the contracts were amended, but we wanted to keep that thought at least in the forefront as we were working through things. We also wanted to look at it from a regional perspective. So Wyoming supplies water for 250,000 people in West Michigan. And as you know, it's the foundation of life. Has a huge economic impact. And so we wanted to, keep in mind that Wyoming owns it. Wyoming's name is on it. But we don't all work and live and do business in Wyoming or wherever we live or work. I mean, we all interact within these agencies. And so, we also approach this, what is best for the region to a certain extent. So I'll focus now really on what things in the new contract are not changed. And you may have heard this concept of a term called beneficial ownership, and it was an ambiguous term in the 1988 contract that the whole reason it was put in there was to allow Ottawa County to separately bond and finance their portion of capital projects. And so we needed to keep that phrase to a certain extent in the new contract. And so it is in there. It is somewhat defined, but it is in there so that Ottawa County can fund capital projects. Otherwise, 100% of the debt and risk would be on the city of Wyoming. So it's an important part, not as much for us as it is for Ottawa County, but it remains unchanged from 1988. Another key concept, and Sheldon, I heard you mention this earlier tonight, that Wyoming, needs to own and be in control of our assets and resources, and this doesn't change that. Wyoming's name is on it. Wyoming is in charge of making all the key decisions on it. We hire, we fire, we own, operate, maintain the assets on our books. None of our wholesale customers have any part of that, so it is retained by us. The new contract also, and we'll get into rates farther down in the slide presentation, but there's a true-up provision in there. So at the end of every fiscal year, after Jody's done her audit, we go in and look at the water actual expenses, and we look at water actual use, and we compare that to what was estimated, and we do a true-up. So if a community overpaid, we give them a refund. If they underpaid, we charge them, and they return that to us. So everything's fair. There's no hidden money anywhere. There's nothing. It's actual costs, actual expenses, actual usage. And I put this last bullet point in here because I hear it, not from Wyoming, obviously, but from some of our adjoining municipalities who are having some extensive rate increases, that Wyoming is profiting from owning and operating the water system. And that's not the case. As Greg will share, we can't make any money on it. So there is Michigan law that dictates that. We can talk about how we can allocate costs fairly, but Wyoming can't sell you a gallon of water and put a 50% markup on it and take in that cash. Legally, we can't do it. So any questions on some of the minor or unchanged? Or only somebody somewhere violated it extensively, and now we're, the result of that. So So I'm going to spend some time really on the next two slides. So this slide really talks about, and by the way, the picture on the right-hand side here is the third transmission main under construction. This was taken, I think, last week. So new concepts, major changes or new language in the water contract. So the old contract with Ottawa County looked at Ottawa County as a whole, but we know that that's not how the water system operates. As I mentioned, there are 9 municipalities that connect to our water system. Each one of them behaves differently, and each one of them impacts our operations and transmission system differently. And so while we still will have a contract with Ottawa County, what we're going to do is look at those communities independently, allocate and assign costs independently, then sum them all up and send that bill as a single bill to Ottawa County. And that Ottawa County can do what they want. I think what they're going to do is follow our rate model and apply it to their 9 wholesale customers. But for purposes of how we're going to allocate costs, interact, and just ask for certain things, we're going to treat them all independently because that's how the system functions. A key concept, and this is something that is really unique to this part of the United States. It's not unique to maybe the western side of the United States, but is this whole concept of a withdrawal limit. So as John was talking about, we are staring at 600 million in improvements in the next years. And the way to, these are not unavoidable, but they can be deferred or delayed. And the way to do that is to put in place a withdrawal limit, which essentially is a speed limit. And so we haven't defined these yet in this new contract because a key to defining that is a study that we have going on now called an optimization study. And that study, which is due to be completed by next spring, for sure a year from now, is going to tell us within the system as a whole where administrative controls will help, where operational controls will help, most importantly, where large dollar capital projects, i.e. storage, water tank storage, investment should be made. And that's going to lead us to defining a withdrawal limit. It's essentially a speed limit. And so what it's going to do is say, okay, each community, you can only withdraw a certain amount of water per day or per hour. And if you exceed that, the next bullet point in there are consequences. If you exceed that, there will be surcharges or some sort of financial penalty associated with that. The reason we're doing this is if we limit and put a speed limit on how much water is withdrawn from our system, we can take those huge capital investments and delay them and move them down the road. So while it appears to be penalizing, it's really what we think is a wise move to spread out in a reasonable time frame investments we need to make in our system.
So Aaron, if they violate the speed limit, they get a speeding ticket, they pay the fine.
Correct. So the unique part about how this is drawn up is the surcharge or the fine that is paid is going to be set aside and used for one of two things. It's either going to be used to offset the increased operational expense. As you know, the more water we produce, the higher our electric rates are, or because indirectly what that community is doing is forcing or speeding up the need for a new expansion. That money will be put into a separate capital account and used to offset the costs of a future capital expense that will benefit the entire system. So it's kind of a unique, novel way of trying to hold everybody accountable, but still allowing them some flexibility to grow and expand.
And this would be on like a per municipality
Correct.
basis. Okay.
Correct. So we have defined as a baseline limit. Let's say if we can't agree on anything, here is the minimum, you're going to get this speed limit applied to you. So everybody knows on the front end, this is the worst case scenario you're going to get. And we came up with that number because we know that's the minimum number we need based on the knowledge we have today to shift the biggest capital expense we have, which is the treatment plant expansion at $235 million in today's dollars, 10 years. So I mentioned that optimization study will give us more information to help us really refine that and come up with a true number that everybody can use.
So there would be a different number potentially for like Hudsonville versus Georgetown.
There could be.
And we would just bill it to that particular city government, and then they can decide how they want to deal with their residents. Okay.
Yeah. And this really is getting in the weeds with rates, but you can say, I want a higher limit. You're going to see it in the rates. So you may want a higher limit and think I just get a higher limit. No, it's going to show up in your rates somehow.
It's almost
Doesn't
like
that
choosing-
also incentivize them to build storage?
Yes. It will incentivize them. If you can reduce your volume on a maximum day or peak hour demand, if you can do that by, let's say, odd even sprinkling, or you could put in some additional storage, which is their expense, not our expense. That will reduce our water rates too. Sheldon, I saw you thinking.
Sounds like a real simple contract.
Well, maybe with this, so when one of those 9 municipalities has a big demand for water, currently then we pump more water to them. And so that's more expense and wear and tear on our water plant to do that.
And we're storing the water and they're using it.
Potentially, right?
Yeah. So then as we pump more and more water to meet that demand, the state is saying, wow, your actual amount of water you're pumping is really starting to bump up to about 80% of your capacity. You need to start planning for a large expansion. If instead of that, we can have that municipality that's really causing this demand build a water tower so that when you have those large demands for water, they can just sort of lower their water tower and we're not pumping.
So are these really significant costs that they're going to want to stay within the speed limits? I mean, I know you can't.
We haven't defined them yet. So will they be? We're going to have Stantec, our consultant, help us with that. We don't want to go down that road.
No.
But I think, I mentioned a $600 million number. That's a big number. And I think as communities see that and look at, well, the alternative is we either put in storage or follow the speed limit, or we spend this amount of money. It's going to be pretty clear to municipalities this is a better way to do things.
Okay, perfect.
So
Is there an opportunity, say somebody like Hudsonville gets a big industrial, somebody wants to come in, can they renegotiate that? And
yes, I'm going to hit on that in a couple slides, but that's one of the beauties of this model. You hit it
We're
exactly.
not allowing growth anymore for the next few years.
Well, it's kind of tied into the last
That's what I-
point here, which is no contracted capacity. So the current contract, you're buying a capacity. There really is no. It's a paper capacity. You're not buying a section of pipe or a portion of the tank or whatever it is. It's a paper capacity, but you're locked into it. And Ottawa County's been locked into the same capacity number since 1988. The other wholesale customer is locked into the same number since 2011. And so I'll explain it in the next slide, but we're going away with that model, and it will allow flexibility to address the exact issue that you just brought up.
So that'll be done on a yearly basis now instead of.
It'll be done on a 5-year basis.
Okay.
Yeah, we're going to do a projection study every 5 years, and that will.
If we have to do a 4th transmission, do we need a new plant or an expansion on the plant we have now?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of your.
If we have to do a 4th transmission line to handle all this water?
That'll be long after I'm gone.
Okay, because I was just thinking, you talked about an expansion of something at
No.
$1 zillion. I'm like, oh, criminy. Okay,
No.
what does this mean?
It's interesting. So we're putting in our 3rd transmission main. Grand Rapids, similarly sized plant, only has 2.
Wow.
So I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about rates. And again, as we approached the contract, we also approached rates. So we didn't say, okay, here's a number we want and back into it. We said, okay, overall, what are we trying to get to in our relationship with Ottawa County and with all of our wholesale customers? So a quick run through these 4 here and then the results. So the rates must be obviously financially sustainable. We want something that is prudent now, but also takes into account 15, 20, 30 years from now, even farther than that, knowing that the investments we make, its infrastructure has a lifespan of 50 to 75 years. We wanted rates to be equitable to all users. Specifically, if you're a community that has an increased water demand long-term, that you are paying a greater proportion of capital costs, because we don't build for tomorrow, we build for tomorrow plus 20 years. And so the projections we talked about take that into account. And if you're a community that's projected to grow and put demands on our system, you should pay a greater chunk of the capital cost that we're investing today to get you there. We wanted rates to be easy to administer and transparent. The way they are currently is not, and we wanted to change that. We want them to be consistent with industry practice. And although there are, models that are unique to West Michigan, we wanted something that, the industry also has a standard that we could follow. And so the result of that was the cash basis of rate making, which doesn't mean anything to you, but it follows the AWWA standard. So an industry standard that is pretty simple. It doesn't use depreciation or rate of return, a whole funky mechanism that's difficult to follow. It uses cash. So our capital projects cost X amount of dollars this year. Here's your percentage you're responsible for. It's easy, it's transparent, it's cash. These next two are related and they're really unique, and credit Stantec for helping us with this. And this talks about the flexibility of a water user coming in that places a huge demand on your system, or one leaves and leaves a huge void in your system. And so how we intend to apply O&M and capital costs is through a weighted allocation. And O&M costs, as you know, that's kind of, there's more weight to what's going on in the past and less weight to what's happening in the future when you project out O&M costs. And so that's what the rate structure does. It looks at 3 years of history, looks at 10, 15, 20 year your use projection and weights it more towards history, place a little bit of weighting on the 10, 15, and 20 year marks, and that's how O&M costs are allocated based on your use. Capital costs are different. So again, capital costs, we build for the future. So if you're a community that is projected to grow 10, 15, 20 years out, more of your rate as it relates to a capital contribution is emphasized on that time period. So, but every year this is looked at. Every 5 years, demand projections are looked at. So if you have a big water user that comes in this year, instead of being locked into a contracted capacity, now you have the flexibility where your rates will and usage patterns will reflect that. So you're bearing that cost, not another community for you. Conversely, if a water user leaves, a big user leaves, you don't have to wait 37 years to the next contract update to take that into account. So that we try to balance those things, balance flexibility with also trying to make sure that rates remain relatively stable and not huge adjustments or swings every year. I talked about an annual true-up on the front end of this, so that remains the same. And one of the difficulties in the current rate model is that we can't project rates. And I feel for some of our wholesale users because we can't do that. And with this new model, we now, because we use the cash basis of rate making, have a better opportunity to do that. And I know they're happy to see that. Questions on rates? Question you're probably asking is, how does this affect Wyoming? So because there is an increased emphasis on demand and growth as we look towards the future, and because there is no defined contracted capacity anymore, Wyoming's rates should be lower, will be lower. We're not a growing community, we're a stable community. We still are, I'll say, a majority partner in the water system as a whole, but our adjoining communities are growing and they're using increasing water demands. And so while we will still retain ownership and all the rights and responsibilities, excuse me, we won't be funding that infrastructure investment as we did in the past. We were in their position and we were growing, and they were more in the passenger seat. So that's going to be the rate impact to Wyoming.
When you say lower, do you mean like lower than they are now, or
Yes.
just that they won't go up more?
But our revenue requirements will go down, but these projections are baked into the rate model. So both of those are correct. So they're increasing, but not as much as they would be otherwise.
Okay, so the increase, I'm just thinking because, we had that huge projection of like 9%, 9%.
We still will have them, but it would be different if we weren't going through this model.
Okay, so it's going to be less bad than those
Yes.
projections? Cool.
Yes. Now I will say, next steps here. This is just with Ottawa County. So we need to apply the same model and same contracts to the other wholesale customers, which have an impact on our rates. But that is the goal, to get there to our yes. We will still see increasing rates, hopefully not as bad as was projected. So next steps. So Ottawa County, Pat, again, my counterpart over there, has presented this draft contract to all of his 9 municipalities. So he's giving them a month or two to review that and provide comments on it. They will all need to approve that and an accompanying agreement where he has some other terms for some other work that's going on. And then it will need to be approved by the Ottawa County Road Commission. So he has a multi-layered process he has to go through. So I can't tell you when it will be before you again, hopefully in the next couple months, and hopefully in a form that is not very much changed than what you saw tonight. But I'm sure there might be tweaks here or there as they all review it. And if you've had a chance to review it, provide comments the same. And these rates would be effective fiscal year 27. So starting next July 1 is the intent here. And also within the next month or so, we intend to start talking to Granville, Cantwell, Byron, and Gaines to show them here's the contract that's coming. Let us know if you have significant issues with this. It's kind of a, you want to say, yeah, it's easy to get everybody all in one contract. It's a little more difficult if everybody do it all at the same time. So we're hoping we'll get there by end of this fiscal year. That's my goal, but we'll see where we go. So this is my last slide. And I just want to recognize the people from Ottawa County that have worked on it, Pat Staskevich, Joe Walsh, and Matt Van Hoff. From Wyoming, there's a blast from the past year. Scott Smith did a lot of work on this, a lot of drafting on this. Myron spent a lot of time on this. Bob Dieneklassen, our retired water plant superintendent. Tracy Schaefer, our treasurer. Jamie Fleming, our current water plant superintendent. So I may be up here talking, but there's a lot of people behind working on this, as John said. And then I mentioned Stantec too. They helped us develop the rate model, provided some really good financial modeling and insight, and that was the team listed there. So really a group effort. We didn't always agree on everything, but we were able to keep talking and really get to where we are today. So that is it.
Any questions?
Great work.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is Communications Department presentation.
Yep, so not seeking a council decision on this. This is just an update from communications to let you know some of the activities that they've been working on and some of the ways that we're trying to improve our communication to the general public, if you will.
Hello, it's been quite some time since I've been able to be up and talk to you guys. So just want to walk through, it's been almost 5 years since the communications department has existed as a department at the city of Wyoming. We started with our first full-time staff person in 2020. She was here for a short period of time, and then I joined the team full-time in December of 2021. So I just want to walk through today a little bit about what we do, and then kind of touch base on some of the goals that council has set for the city manager's office in terms of strengthening some of our digital engagement and what we're currently doing, and then what we plan to do. So we started full-time in 2020. Prior to that, we utilized Sabo Public Relations on kind of a part-time basis. They had somebody embedded with us, I think, 15, 16 hours a week. And then they were at Sabo PR for the rest of that time. So they handled communications, mostly social media, a lot of media relations. And that's actually how I started. I was embedded part-time with Sabo PR and then decided to join with the city of Wyoming full-time. We hired a second communications staff person in 2022, and then Kadri Tavares joined us in April of 2024. So we handle a lot of different things, but most of our daily tasks can fit in these 5 buckets. So crisis and reputation management. So if you think about large scale events like a boil water advisory or something that is some kind of emergency that typically disrupts city services, we help manage that. And identify some of the key issues, how we typically communicate with stakeholders, and then appropriate communication methods. So whether that's getting information out via social media, traditional media, website, emergency alerts, things like that, we help kind of guide that process. And then we have strategic communications. So just some different campaigns that information that we want people to know. You know, we work with our internal team to understand our goals and challenges of things that we're trying to communicate. So I think about our 2023 First Responders Millage. That was a big push after the field income tax to kind of explain to our community why we needed that funding. And there was a end goal in mind. So we worked really closely with our public safety team to kind of draft a creative, realistic plan and collaborate with each department to kind of measure how success looks. Social media, super fun. Social media is really fun, but it's also a really effective tool to engage our residents, share information, and help manage the reputation of the city. So since hiring Kadri, we've done a lot of additional videography work, kind of taking some of those topics that aren't necessarily super fun and making it fun. Kadri's done a fabulous job educating people on different ways to vote within the city of Wyoming, different stuff with our public safety department, kind of helping share what we've done with our 2023 public safety millage funds and just different things like that. Anymore, a lot of social media content. I mean, we have to really hook people right away. A lot of videography, a lot of photography, a lot of visual content to really get people interested in what we're trying to share. So she's done a really, really awesome job with that. So we've increased our reach on Instagram, Facebook, and we recently started a TikTok account to try to reach some of those younger audiences. And then we have our traditional media relations. So that, you know, consists of media releases, different pitches, interviews. We help facilitate all of that, provide support in writing those releases, drafting pitches to share good stories, and providing interview prep and support for city staff. Photography and videography. Prior to me starting, I didn't see a ton of professional photography and videography. So we've really tried to make an effort to enhance that visual component to our social media. We've gotten headshots, professional headshots done for our police department, for all of council, our department heads, just different ways to kind of share those high quality photography and videography throughout the city. It's really industry standard now, so we want to make sure that we're keeping up on that. And it also just allows us to incorporate that higher quality and engaging content into our strategies. So now we're going to walk through the goals that council has set for the city manager's office to enhance our digital engagement strategy and kind of talk through what we're currently doing and what we plan to do. So strategic messaging is one thing that you guys would like to see a little bit more of. So we kind of focus on what we want our stakeholders to know. We just launched a monthly e-newsletter that covers a variety of topics. I don't know if any of you have subscribed. We share it on our social media pages, through the direct MailChimp link, and our website. But we've tried to tackle a couple of complex issues such as taxes. We always hear, where's my tax money going? How is it being spent? Things like that. So we worked closely with our treasurer's office to show a diagram of a dollar bill and what percent of a dollar actually goes to the city of Wyoming. So working to educate people on the whole picture of their taxes in the city of Wyoming. Also project funding. So, we see a lot of misinformation on social media, like about, I'm just going to say, the pedestrian bridge, about funding for that, and how we've taken that, all of those things that we've seen on social media, and made sure that we're sharing where exactly the funding came from, different things like that. So I'll show you an example. Here's kind of what our new digital Wyoming record looks like. And just for the pedestrian bridge, we highlight what we're going to do, but then we also have a little section in there about Did You Know, which highlights maybe some of the misinformation we've seen, or just information we really want to pull out for residents. We know people are skimming on their emails. We know they're skimming on social media. So we're trying to make a conscious effort in pulling out these really important pieces of information. So if you can't read it, it says the new pedestrian bridge was entirely funded by outside grants. The city works hard to be good stewards of your tax dollars. We seek outside grant funding for capital projects and programs whenever possible. Next is public awareness. So what do we want our stakeholders to know? What we're currently doing, we utilize social media in our newsletter to share information about taxes, millage funding status, such as positions hired, equipment purchased, and facilities renovated. That was a really important thing that we wanted to continue doing after the public safety millage, is show people where that money was being spent. A lot of that, happened with filling a lot of those positions, purchasing the platform truck for the fire department, and then renovating the Burton and Division fire stations and having those operational 24/7. We plan to continue to utilize our newsletter, our new website, which we'll talk about a little bit more, and social media to educate residents on the proposal to potentially streamline and consolidate millages moving forward. So here's just an example, public awareness. This is the dollar bill graphic I was talking about. So we pull out specifically where the funds for the city of Wyoming go, and then where everything else, where the rest of the money is going. And then this was a little clip of a video from Facebook that Kadri put together. This is showing training from the platform fire truck, but also just tying it back to the public safety millage and reminding people that this piece of equipment was purchased due to the passing of that millage. Citywide updates. So what updates are being made successfully to share information with residents? Again, the e-newsletter, but also creating more engaging social media content to boost engagement on educational information. Like I said, attention spans are shorter on social media. A lot of people don't want to see longer form written content, so we have to hook people early on. Video and photography is a great way to do that. And Kadri's been doing a really great job with that. We're working currently with Nicole's department to put together an instructional video for the new Hawk signal on DeHoop, so that residents, pedestrians, and drivers will know how that will be operational. They'll know how to use it. They'll know what to expect when they're driving under it, different things like that. So that kind of video work seems to get better attention from our residents. And then what we're going to do, we're in the beginning stages of our citywide website remodel. So this will allow for mass notifications, newsletter distribution, and just more features than we have in our current website.
I have a question real quick. We say mass notifications. Is that something that people would have to opt into, or how does that work?
Yeah, it looks like for this specific company we're going with, they would have to opt into it, but it would give us more control. Just with the boil water advisory, we had to work through the county. And so it felt like it took a little bit longer for us to be able to send that mass notification, which with this, while we would have to work to get people to sign up, we'd have complete control over sending out that notification.
So would it be like those emergency, it's not like a text message, it's like that thing that comes up if there's like a code, what am I thinking of?
Yeah.
There's like a missing child. And
it would actually be more of it would be a text message.
Oh, okay.
So it would go, you could get notified via email, via text, or different, I don't know how else they could do it, but those are the two ways that they could notify, and they can opt in if they only want emails or if they only want text messages. And it seems like it will be a really great way for us to push information out, and we're learning more about that specific module right now.
I take it we'll have some sort of plan for how to get people to actually
sign up for it. Yeah, that would probably be a pretty heavy push on social media, in our e-newsletter, have, talking points for city council at different public events, kind of push that out. Cool. Yeah. Again, just some different examples of a couple of other pieces of misinformation we tried to combat in our newsletter, as well as another educational video that Kadri put together for in-person voting. That was new this year for that time period. So that took a little bit of education for our residents. And so if you go on social media and watch that, Kadri kind of walks through the whole process and the different ways that you're able to vote in the city of Wyoming, which was really helpful. Trust and transparency. So how are we working to foster stronger community trust through open and accessible communication channels? So Kadri and I are consistently monitoring and responding to misinformation and questions on social media. Obviously, there's going to be people that are posting just to post, but when somebody has a genuine question or concern, we're always working to manage that, to answer their question as best we can, or point them in the direction of a subject matter expert who can. We invite and encourage our residents to have conversations with those department heads, and we host public meetings or open houses for larger projects. So I know Nicole's team has had a handful of open house type meetings for different projects, and so that helps kind of gain that trust back. This is just an example. The boil water advisory was probably one of the bigger crisis projects that I've been involved with in the city of Wyoming. And so it obviously started out, there was a lot of unknowns for residents and we didn't have a ton of information for them. So we did see some maybe frustration on social media, but as we continue to consistently provide updates as best we could, we actually saw some of the comments end up turning, which was really cool to see. People really appreciated the consistent updates. Editing things when they couldn't read a map right, or making sure that communications were translated into Spanish. So this is just kind of an example of how our consistent communication actually ended up with people being nice to us on social media, and it ended up being okay. So. Resident engagement mechanisms. So how are we creating interactive platforms to facilitate direct access to city information? So what we're currently doing is sending that information straight to their inbox and sharing it on social media. We also, when we share these newsletters or any specific events, we make sure that we go into some of the community pages on social media where not all of those residents follow us on our city page, but they might follow that page. So we make sure that we're posting in there and able to get some of those residents. And a lot of time we get really good feedback and engagement in those community groups, as well as to our media partners. We plan to implement the new city website, which is looking like we could provide a live chat feature to assist residents as best as possible. I think that some of the chatbots utilize AI, and so it would direct you with certain keywords to the pages that you need to see, but there's also some live, like actual person chatbots. So we're looking at all of those different modules that can be utilized with our new website, but that would be a really great example of something that we could implement to give residents access to city information. Media strategy, how are we developing and executing a comprehensive media strategy? We work with media on a weekly basis. We work with our media partners to share critical information, providing our interviews with subject matter experts, answering inquiries, that kind of thing. One of the big things right now, we had the Godwin Mercado grand opening. So when we have grand openings like the pedestrian bridge or Godwin Mercado or fire station openings after hours or on weekends, we really try our best to facilitate some sort of media sneak peek or behind the scenes during their working hours. It's a little challenging to get media at certain hours of the day or certain days of the week. So we try our best to make sure that we're able to work with their schedules to allow them to have some sort of content, some sort of interview process. So we did that with the Division Avenue Fire Station. We did it with Godwin Mercado, and then we plan to do that with the bridge. We're hoping, obviously, that they can attend the grand openings, but if not, we're very confident that we'd be able to get them a behind the scenes look at those projects ahead of time. Here's just a couple of examples. So we shared a Wood TV article. They did a pretty long form story on our Division Avenue Fire Station, which was really great. Again, tying it back to the public safety millage and reminding people that this is now staffed 24/7 for the first time ever. And then a piece on the Godwin Mercado. Proactive issues management. So how are we strengthening responsiveness to emerging concerns on social media? John asks us all the time how we are always on social media, and we are literally just always looking at comments, we follow so many different community pages. We follow different hashtags on social media. So we are anytime we're on our phone, anytime we're on our own social media, we're always looking for things related to the city of Wyoming. So, I mean, a lot of the times we might not respond right then and there, but it's something that we've probably seen it. I think about the car accident on Prairie and Taft maybe, and there was some concern on social media about that curve, and we saw that a lot of that ahead of time. And we're just keeping an eye on things. So we do that with a lot of just different police events. Anytime there's frustration about construction, maybe questions about bills, we see all of that. And so we just are kind of always monitoring it, always aware of it. And then hopefully, because we're aware of it, should we need to respond or come up with some type of response, we know what we need to do. And we've been aware of it. This is a couple of examples of some just different things that we see regarding the city of Wyoming that we don't necessarily have to jump in on right away, but something that we should be aware of. So Georgetown Township talking about how they purchased water from the city of Wyoming, and that was their increased bills happened because of our increases. So Aaron and I were aware of that pretty much as it happened. So then when the media did reach out to us for a comment about that large increase, we were able to give them a pretty comprehensive interview as to what happened there. Another post just asking about some construction things, and then another one asking about how to pay the water bill without paying a fee. A lot of times these are all posted in different community groups. So I think the two on the right were from the Wyoming Informed page. So a lot of times people do a really good job of self-regulating in the comments, or people are super informed and they link right back to the city's page. And so it sometimes resolves on its own, but we monitor those pages. So should there be some kind of question that we're able to just quickly answer, we can jump in and do that as well. Digital solutions, how are we exploring solutions for bill payments, reservations, notifications, and news distribution? So that kind of goes back to our website. We're finalizing those website interviews, and our new website vendor that we're looking at has the capability to either integrate or provide services for bill pay, reservations, notifications, news. So I know we have a couple of different external services that we use for bill pay. Krishan's team uses RecTrack for their parks reservations, but that website consultant will be able to seamlessly integrate that into the website. So it will almost feel like it's a part of the website, but will obviously use their own programs. We've also confirmed that the new website will be completely mobile friendly, and it will recognize whatever device it's being accessed from. So content and buttons will shift appropriately to accommodate any screen size. I know that council was maybe interested in an actual app in the past, but this is we probably will have more success with like an actual website that just conforms to whatever device, because then somebody doesn't have to download a different application. So we've confirmed that everything will be completely mobile friendly, and then based on the applications and modules that are included in the website, they can either log in that way and create an account that way and just log in from wherever they are. And I think that's it. Is there any questions I can help answer?
I don't know if it's a question per se, but I just keep thinking about the AI chat bot. I'm not in love with that idea. I'm going to be honest. Mm-hmm. I've never gotten good service from an AI chat bot.
I agree.
I'm always just like screaming, oh my God, give me a human before I lose my bananas. So, I don't know about that part, but everything else sounds great.
Yeah, we had a couple they showed us how it pulls some of those responses, and it was pretty impressive. I'm not going to lie. Like if someone is looking at how to pay a bill, because I agree, same thing. I've been like agent. I just want to talk to a human. But we'll make sure whatever is on the website is actually worth their while for sure.
I thought you get paid to be on social media all day long. You won't get in trouble by HR.
I would love to not be on social media sometimes.
Right?
Yes.
So what do you use? Is there like a certain, not an app, but is there something that will flag certain things that are referencing Wyoming and different things that are happening? So for example, I'll see things on, now I get these feeds from Quiet Neighbors or something like that. And a lot of stuff that just goes, and then what makes you decide to respond or not respond, or else to get staff or all of us informed of, hey, this is going on, it's misinformation.
Mhm.
Just trying to, how do we manage that? And it's a big task.
It
That's
is.
where, I would like to be able to be helpful. I've tried to be as neutral as I can, but I'll respond sometimes to misinformation. But how do we really get into that?
Yeah.
Really neutralize.
Yeah, I mean, it is, I have Google alerts on for probably 50 words surrounding the city of Wyoming, like just different things. So I will get a Google alert if there's any news that pop up. But honestly, I've kind of curated my social media feed and same with Kadri, that we just see it on our feed now with the algorithm. Obviously, there's misinformation out there every single day. I will say we monitor through those comments, and sometimes like it is just, you can tell when somebody has a genuine question or if they really have some severe distrust for the city and anything that we're going to say. If there is a genuine question, we do respond. We're always linking them to more information, and should that follow-up continue with misinformation, we don't engage further than that. A lot of the time, if it's something with like 2 or 3 comments and they've seemed to figure it out in the comments, we obviously don't have capacity as with 2 people to respond to all of those. But if it's something that people are starting to tag media, or they're starting to tag council members, or, providing the email for the city manager, that's something that we would be like, okay, we should jump in and try to address this before it blows up. So it is really a case-by-case basis, unfortunately, but we try to check a couple of different criteria before deciding should we continue to engage further.
Good. Then a couple more questions, and I promise I'll stop.
You're fine.
So do you have is there like a magic number of this many posts that you put out a week that you set to try to do to get awareness and engagement? And then also, do you have like a planned out calendar of, hey, these are the themes that we're going to try to tackle, again, with if the world is stable,
yeah,
you're gonna go into disaster mode with other things. But are there things that you put out a kind of a roadmap on what you're going to focus on from a messaging standpoint?
Yeah, luckily, city operations are very cyclical. So like in the fall, we have our leaf rentals, we have our voting typically sometime in November, we have odd even parking, then we move into like snowplow. So we do have a citywide content calendar. And then we also have content calendars for public safety, for police and fire. So we do plan that out on a week by week basis, kind of what our plan is. We don't have a certain number of posts that we're trying to hit each week. We really focus more on quality over quantity. We don't want to just post to post. So we make sure that the content that we're posting is really engaging and it's quality content. But we do follow a calendar each year, and kind of, if there's something like last year, we changed a couple of things with odd even parking, and we had some feedback on that. So we know this year, moving into that we'll start posting that earlier, and that whole process for paying tickets, so that it's more seamless for our departments that we're also involved in that. But that's kind of how we manage that now. We do plan our posts out.
That's it?
I will give you all a break. Yes.
Any other questions?
Great questions.
So this is one of the things that we asked John to focus on. And so now it's your opportunity to provide feedback if you have any. I wonder, do you monitor Nextdoor at all?
Yes.
You do?
I do, but
I didn't hear you mention it, but
my address is City Hall, so I think I only get like the area of City Hall. I can see the police department's posts, but I don't see like every single post. It's kind of weird. I haven't necessarily figured out that algorithm yet, but we are on Nextdoor.
there is misinformation on
Yes.
Nextdoor too. So
Yep.
that's, if you can figure out a way to monitor the whole city, I don't know how they break up those neighborhoods, but that would be one of my suggestions. I don't know if anybody else has any others.
I guess, yeah, it's just hard to think outside the box with how to reach people, right? Like obviously the internet is the big one, but like have we explored or even just brainstormed anything that's not the internet?
Yeah, John and Patrick, I think we talked about this probably a year ago now, but when they were at Ottawa County, did a countywide newsletter. So that would obviously be kind of pricey to do for the city of Wyoming, but we've looked into doing maybe a direct mail once or twice a year. We obviously can't capture any analytics on that if people open it or if they're reading it or what they're retaining from it, but it is something that we've thought about, especially for our residents that aren't necessarily on the internet or on social media.
I think we have used the water bills too as
Yep.
a mechanism to insert timely information.
Yeah, we stopped doing the print record in every water bill, but when we've had, like we did when we increased water and sewer rates last year, we did include that for 3 billing cycles. So everybody in the city was informed that the water and sewer rates were increasing.
I almost wonder too if there's any opportunities for in-person, like this might sound silly, but like anytime we have an event, could there be just a table set up that's almost like a City of Wyoming, ask me anything, you know what I mean? Because people word vomit all of this stuff on the internet so much more aggressively than they would if they had to say it to someone's face. I think we might have some more productive conversations if we could find a way to reach people in person.
Yeah, I agree. We're going to have a city table at the pedestrian bridge grand
Sweet.
opening, and that will have our HR staff. So we'll have, obviously they'll be able to ask any questions and they're informed about a lot of the city happenings, but also if someone's interested in a job, we'll have all of that information too. Cool. Yeah.
I was thinking like in the school system where we have the day off, all the blast phone calls go out to people.
Oh,
Would that be an idea? To like when the water had to be boiled, can you get a hold of those phone numbers and put out a blast phone call?
Yeah, I think that's like that rave notification system. I think that might be what they use. And I believe though that people have to opt in to receive those, so they have to opt in and say, here's my phone number, so that if there is that like type of emergency, you can send the text to me. But that's what we're trying to do with some of these notifications that Bree was bringing up. So for example, our e-newsletter, the Wyoming Record, I guess that is text too, but it's also email and I don't know what we're up to right now.
Non-internet or non.
Yeah, I could see older people wanting a phone call.
They want a phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it might be one, they'd have to opt in. My understanding is they'd have to opt in and give us their phone number for us to potentially do that, because we wouldn't know their number.
We've also done a handful of targeted mailings, or when for the Godwin Mercado grand opening, they went and flyered the neighborhood and things like that. So we have looked at, same with Kadrian, I did that for the Division Avenue Fire Station. We went and walked the neighborhood for that grand opening. And so we have tried to get engagement that way too for people that aren't always on social media.
Any comments? Thank you.
Of course.
Any other matters, John?
Just 4 more issues. No. Sorry.
Okay. Now is acknowledgement of visitors. If you'd like to make a public comment, now's your chance. Anything you want to say? Seeing none, for the good of the order, we'll run around the table once. We'll start with Rob.
Said my piece. Thank you.
Sheldon?
I just wanted to mention Krishan, and I saw your new employee on Facebook today, Mark, putting lines on a soccer field. Looks great. Well, I love the efficiency, and I just really liked it. It was cool. Thanks.
Doesn't talk back either.
Not like I do.
Does it have a name?
We're calling sick. Yeah.
Renee?
The only other comment I heard from one of the residents was people flying other countries' flags in their homes and on their homes and not an American flag. So we'll probably have some more comments about that. Who knows? I'm probably in social media, so.
I think this is the one meeting I've said the fewest words, so I'm going to keep that on track.
Marissa?
I heard Rob quietly ask, does the robot have a name? Does the robot have a name? Well,
Do you have an idea, Rob?
Stripe.
Stripe? That's a good one.
There you go.
Could we utilize the new website and put up a poll and let the people decide?
Hey.
We do that. Grand Rapids did that. It went goes down.
Really?
saw some examples of this. I think. You just name it yourself. You can call it whatever you want to.
There you go.
Okay.
We would call him Spot, but he doesn't do spots, he does stripes.
All right, so meeting adjourned.
That's good.